Welcome everyone, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. First, I would like to extend a special thank you to our lunch sponsor, Clover Lindsay Sports Foundation. Erin is here today. You'll find a beautiful postcard in your packets with some information about the Sports Foundation, so I encourage you to look at that. Doing great work in our community. Also, lunch today is from Freedom a la carte, which is run by employees and supports victims of human trafficking. So it's another great organization to check out and enjoy lunch. Today, we're taking time to talk about substance abuse and misuse in our community. Substance abuse can include prescription drugs, vaping, alcohol, and the use of marijuana and other substances. Countless studies document the negative effects of drugs and alcohol use on the teenage brain. We know that adolescents may be uniquely susceptible to lasting damage from drug use, at least until the early or mid-20s, as the brain is still under construction. During this period of neurodevelopment, the brain is thought to be particularly sensitive to damage from these exposures. And the frontal cortex, the region critical to planning, judgment, decision-making, and personality, is one of the last areas to fully develop. Other effects of the developing brain include interference with neurotransmitters and abnormal brain shape and structure volume. The dangerous effects of vaping cannot be overstated. A recent CDC study found that 99% of the e-cigarettes sold in venues in the United States contain nicotine. The harmful effects of nicotine on the brain has been well documented. You can get addicted to vaping, and there are harmful cancer-causing metal particles and other toxic chemicals present in vape. We will discuss all of this in more detail momentarily with our panelists. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to jump right in and introduce our great panelists. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here today. You might, bring you officers in as well, so we could at least see you as we're speaking to you. First, I'll start with the HEART team, which is Health Awareness and Recovery Together. Dawn Steele is the Hilliard prosecutor and a core member of HEART. She has been an attorney in the Hilliard Law Department for 3 years. She has spent 17 years working in the criminal justice system, treatment courts, and restorative justice programs. She helped create and secure funding for the Hilliard Recovery Court that just celebrated its first group of graduates from the 2-year intensive recovery program. She graduated from the University of Dayton with a BS in Business Administration and received her law degree from the Ohio State University. She's a volunteer with the Hilliard City School District and helps coordinate efforts between HCSD and the City of Hilliard to address youth vaping. She's on the Franklin County Public Health Youth Tobacco Prevention Task Force. Dawn has a passion for projects that help educate about substance use and mental health disorders, protecting our youth from making unhealthy choices, and helping young people achieve healthier and crime-free lives. Thanks for being here, Dawn. Debbie Hampton is a core member of HEART and works in communities to promote awareness and prevention with the Can You See Me Now bedroom, which we have here today. Debbie serves as the youth ministry coordinator for her church. She's an advocate for safe and healthy communities as vice chair for the Far East Side Area Commission, president of the Cross Creek Village Civic Association, and co-chair of the Block Watch. Debbie is a freelance graphic designer and author of Cancer, Reflections on Life with Cancer. Her family has mentored a friend addicted to drugs and has fostered her son. She has been an active volunteer within Hilliard City Schools since 2003. Debbie looks forward to sharing her heart for youth and prays that not one more will be lost. Thank you for being here. Officer Kelly. Leland Kelly has been in law enforcement for nearly 20 years. Officer Kelly began his career at the Marion Police Department in 2002. While at the MPD, Officer Kelly was a member of the Special Response Team, primarily assisting with execution of narcotics and high-risk search warrants. Officer Kelly also served as a member of the Federal High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Task Force. He came to the New Albany Police Department in 2007. Officer Kelly served as the DARE officer from 2013 until January of 2021, when he was assigned as a school resource officer for the New Albany Plain Local School District. Outside of work, Officer Kelly volunteers as a New Albany High School football coach, New Albany youth wrestling coach, and assists with the New Albany Special Olympics. I didn't know all that until I read your bio, so thank you for all that you do for the community. Officer Renner is our K-9 officer. He joined the New Albany Police Department in 2006. He has served in the department in multiple specialized positions over the last 14 and a half years. He currently serves on the bike patrol unit and the traffic crash investigation team. He is the department's canine handler and has served with Canine Amigo since 2019. Canine Amigo has not only assisted the city of New Albany, but also neighboring jurisdictions and federal agencies. To date, Canine Amigo has assisted in the confiscation of over 75 pounds of illegal narcotics in the central Ohio area. Thank you, Officer Renner, for being here. We're going to start first with a presentation from Hart, and then we'll get in to a panel discussion after that. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Hart. You all can take a seat. Thank you.
What are we looking at for an end time here for the panel?
I would say you have a thought until 1, if that's okay.
Okay, that's great. You want to give me maybe a 10-minute warning and a 5-minute warning? That would be great. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for being here. I think this is the first step in what we ask of everybody is just to educate yourself and to learn about what's going on and get more information. And then our theme of today is going to be start the conversation if you haven't already. So the main message today is going to be talk to your kids, talk to other people in your community, share information, share resources, share knowledge. So we do a lot of different formats based upon what we're asked to do, but this one is really about, we're going to talk about starting that conversation, having conversations with your school resource officers, having conversations with your kids, with your neighbors, and really pulling together as a community. And that's how Heart started in Hilliard, was bringing all the different facets of the community together to talk and say, what can we do as a community to all work together and help our community be as healthy and safe as possible? Because as the officers can tell you, there's a lot of bad things out there. That's just the nature of the world. There's a lot of people out there trying to sell drugs, people trying to get your kids addicted to drugs. And we have really good kids. So we just need to, as a community, from a very young age, build that support network around where they don't feel isolated and they don't feel alone and don't feel like that person's more appealing to them than everything else that can be offered. That there was some mention of Street Smart. Street Smart is a phenomenal program, and Street Smart would get into more in-depth details of some of the things you see in the bedroom here. A lot of the bedroom items we're gonna kind of cover in categories, but we're not gonna show you every single item. Street Smart would do that. They have led a lot of them throughout the county, throughout the year. So if you're more interested in learning details about the items you see here and what they're finding on the street and what officers are finding on the street, I encourage you as a follow-up to this to further educate yourself, look for those types of programs in the area. What we've really done is we've really turned our focus right now with, we didn't talk a lot about mental health, but given what has happened, and I know we're tired of talking about COVID, but given what has happened, it kind of changed the game. That even our youth task force with Franklin County kind of took a back seat on vaping and tobacco usage because we had to deal with COVID. So we're getting back into having these presentations. This is the first presentation we've done in a long time, and having these conversations. I think we did one virtually in April. So we kind of changed that focus. And do I need this turned back on? Or just, okay. Okay, I clicked it. Okay, so we are Heart. So about starting that conversation, that is one of the big questions we get is, how do you talk to your kids about this? And there is guidance from the state of Ohio on curriculum for schools that guidance programs are incorporating in as young as kindergarten. And it is just to start educating them about the importance of being aware of what you're putting in your body. And that goes back to what in the intro she was talking about the brain development. That their brain is still growing and developing. And the most important part of your brain, which is your decision-making part of your brain, is not fully developed till somewhere between 21 and 25. And we always get that, well, you do these things, you drink alcohol, why can't I? Or you drink caffeine, why can't I? Or you can have this, why can't I? And I think that's the biggest thing to understand, to educate your kids, that our brains, for good or for bad, are fully developed. You know, what we did back then impacted our brain development, but we're out of that development stage of our brains. And as your parent, just like when you were pregnant, and you were worried about what you were consuming and what vitamins you were taking because you wanted their body and their brain to develop appropriately, it's the same once they're outside of the body. So an easy way with the little kids, the things that they're talking to them about, and an easier thing to talk about is caffeine consumption, because caffeine's not illegal. So it's not as intimidating. So that's kind of where we recommend that people start. You can also start with things like Tylenol and aspirin and ibuprofen. And just from a young age, or even now, if you haven't really had a lot of these conversations yet, this is a good starting point for any age. To say, hey, did you realize how much caffeine is in a Starbucks? Did you realize how much caffeine is in a Monster? It's a lot more than people think that it is. And then to say, you understand that's impacting your brain growth, and kind of talk about something that's not as intimidating. And when you're talking about prescription medications, talk about, make sure you read the bottle, look at the chart, what's appropriate for your weight, what's appropriate for your size. Make sure you're consulting with your parents or with your doctor. You just don't go to the cupboard and just start taking things, because you don't really know how that's going to impact your body. So those kind of conversations are easier to have, and those are the kind of discussions that guidance counselors are incorporating into the schools as part of like Healthy Mind, Healthy Body programs, that they're not talking to kindergartners about drugs. They're talking to them about making healthy choices and, you know, the food groups. And once you get outside of the food groups and you start getting into sugar and you get into caffeine, that's having certain impacts on your body. So that's kind of the approach that's been suggested, and there's recommendations from the state of Ohio on that. And you can talk to your schools. I'm sure your guidance counselors have different programming either in place or that they're working towards. But the conversations should continue at home, in your communities, and to just make people more aware of that, because we're not getting into it, but where we came as a society with when you had an injury, you got a pill, and then the pill was supposed to take away the pain, that we're kind of backtracking, that people had no idea, and lawsuits are showing may have been misled into what was being put into their body. So it's important to have these conversations. Vaping is the biggest thing you will see. I don't know about you guys, but they've seized a device from somebody as young as a 4th grader. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Yeah, and it was, we've had it like one time, and they had older siblings. You're usually looking about 6th, 7th grade is when we're starting to get finding these in the schools. As you'll read on the news, it's an ever evolving thing. We keep adding things to our presentation because they keep creating new things. So we put different types that are up here. We just want parents to be aware. We can't get into all of them, but educate yourself on what the newest devices look like, because they're ever changing. And one of the reasons they're ever changing is they want to make money, so they're going to change their devices to try to get into loopholes in the walls. So that's what's going on right now, and I could talk forever about the loopholes that they're getting into. And now they're saying, so it started out, the devices, when we started doing these presentations, Juul was all the rage, and Juul still is pretty popular for the multi-use. That's probably the most popular multi-use you're going to see. I think the important thing to know is the different pieces that the charger, it's hard, I don't have a pointer you can show. I'm going to show them the charger and take it off. This charger just looks like a USB. So you might just see that little bottom, take the bottom piece off. That little bottom piece charger, you might think that charges their camera. That might charge their school iPad. You don't know that that charges a pop. So they might not have their Juul on them, but they might have their charger, and kids will share chargers. So only one kid needs to have a charger, and then other kids can plug into it. Also those little, so Juul doesn't do flavors anymore, but when they did, you'll see those colored caps. We had several parents say, I found one of those plastic colored caps and I had no idea what it was, and didn't realize that was those are the pods that you put in, that once that pod's used up, you put it back, you put a different one in the device. So we just want you to be aware of those pieces. So if you find a piece or a part of that anywhere in your house, in their backpack, in their car, something to have a conversation about, because you've now identified a piece of a vaping device. That is also what we call a Sorin. We haven't seen a lot of those. but it's a demonstration how these companies will make them look like things that kids can have in their backpack and a parent wouldn't know. They make highlighters that are shaped like that.
And I bought this at Speedway, so.
So it's just kind of being aware to really look at it. Okay, a highlighter, it looks like it on the surface, but it has a button, it has a mouthpiece, and those kind of things. So when they took the flavors away from the multi-use devices, their solution was, we're going to do single-use devices, and there's no way. They did not prohibit flavors from single-use devices. So then they came up with these little things that are less technology, but you only get a few puffs out of them, and then you throw them away.
And there's all kinds of brands. So there's Hyde, what is this one? QV, all kinds of brands. And these were purchased over 2 years ago. So I'm sure if you went into a Speedway or a convenience store or a Puff Palace, you would find a lot more.
And the thing about the plasticky ones is those don't look, they're not as round as a chapstick or a lipstick, but they make some of them that look just like a plastic tube of flavored lipstick. It would be even harder to identify than that shape. So it's just things to look for. The other newest thing now is that they have started to crack down on nicotine-based devices, which are, it's derived from a tobacco plant. So they've got creative and said, well, if I use a synthetic created nicotine that I created in a lab and put it in the device, it's not derived from tobacco. I created it in a lab. And so now these new regulations don't apply to me. And that is the latest fight that is going on. The FDA is saying, no, it's still a drug, even if you so it may not fall under our tobacco regulations, but it falls under our drug regulations. But there's going to be now lawsuits over that. So it's ever changing. Yeah, we haven't bought anything new in about 1.5 years, but I'm sure there's new stuff out there you guys might know about.
They're also taking the pods and filling them with marijuana dabs or other things that are not from a store regulated, and they are contain THC.
And that is the other big concern, is that kids will refill them and resell them and you don't know what's in them. But we talked about, I mean, some of these are coming from overseas, you don't know what's in them. And the majority, and you guys can probably speak to this too, the majority of times when they're seizing these things from kids or they're seizing pills or something, and the kid says, this is what I bought, or this is what I thought I was getting, over 90% of the time, it's not what they thought it was, or it's not what they thought they bought. That there's other stuff in there.
Or it's cut with something.
Yeah, and so that's the big concern. They may think, oh, what's the big deal? I went to get a nicotine, you know, you smoked cigarettes when you were back in high school. Well, when it gets seized or if it gets tested, that's not what was in it. There was marijuana in it. Somebody was trying to give them pods to try to get them to addicted to marijuana to buy more product from them. So our kids are getting duped by these companies and by these people on the street that they think they're just buying nicotine. Some of them, I don't know if they still do, say, oh, it's just vapor. There's no nicotine in there. They're being told, oh, it's just vapor. It just tastes good. There's nothing bad in there. That's not the case.
I always counter that with go buy a pack of gum. They're just doing it for the flavor.
Yeah. So, and the kids will believe this stuff, which is why we need to educate them and say, no, you know, who in your life is looking out for you? They're looking out for you. Your parents are looking out for you, your neighbors. Are you going to believe them or the person on the street who's trying to make money off of you? So that's why these conversations are important. There's also the refillable, you know, we don't see refillable ones with the juices as much, do we?
I haven't seen any.
They've gone more to these single uses, and it's because it's easy to just throw away so your parents can't find it.
But they look like this. And they're very like strawberry, sour menace, green apple.
And again, they said they weren't marketing to kids. I don't know. That seems pretty suspicious. And we used to say, if your kid walks out of the bathroom and the bathroom smells like something that a smell that shouldn't be coming out of there, like okay, some kids have strawberry shampoo, but if you know your son doesn't have strawberry shampoo, they walk out of the bathroom and it smells like strawberries, that's something to start asking some questions about. And that's the whole thing. It's about a conversation. It's a questions. It's getting to know them, getting comfortable. It's not about accusing them. It's not about getting freaked out. The thing about this is to freak you out. You know, it's to help you have information to have those conversations And then if you have that conversation and they know you're educated what you're talking about, that then they will start to trust what you're saying about these products over their friends and over the people on the streets. So these are some of the new single-use ones. They're always pretty colors and bright. The ones on the right are the ones that look a lot more like chapsticks. We don't see a ton of this with you can buy the fancy things like the sweatshirts and the backpacks that have the vaping devices built into them, and the watches. In general, I don't know if you guys are seeing a lot of that.
I've heard a lot about it, but I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, our schools haven't seized any of these. They've heard about them. Officers keep themselves aware of the trends like we do, and we work with our officers to keep us informed about what's going on in this area. So this is kind of my one slide. If we did our big long presentation, we dive into each of these items, and this is kind of more the street smart part of it. These are just the categories of things that we ask you to be on the lookout for. Drug and alcohol hides. Anything that you could hide something in and it's not what it looks like it is. Things that are commonly sold online as jewelry hides or money hides, the kids could turn them into a place to hide things from you. So again, it's not to freak you out. It's not to send you home and start tearing your kids' room apart, but to find a way, find what works for you and your relationship for your child to establish that you're going to start looking at things and looking through. So that's an example of two things. One is be aware that beer cans don't really look like beer cans anymore. So that's a beer can. They're really pretty, especially these craft beers. So your kid might think, oh, my mom and dad are so dumb. I can have this in my car. They won't even know this is a beer. They'll think it's an iced tea or it's a fancy can. So really read what's on it and if there's alcohol in it. And then those wraps, somebody on Etsy sells those. We have a Sprite one here somewhere too.
25 bucks for a 5-pack.
Yeah, that you can just buy those wraps that look like pop to put around your beer cans. We say this is the old school way.
There you go.
Just get a McDonald's cup, put your beer down in there and put the cup. But we talked to a lot of people growing up. That's the kind of things we did. But those haven't gone out of style. So still remember the simple things. So the homemade things, the easy things, a lot of kids may not. They might think, oh, if I go online or on Amazon or something gets delivered, my parents are going to pick up on that. But I can make something and they won't know.
So speaking of making, regular iced tea can sitting on your kid's desk. I took a can opener and slit the top off and made myself a pill hide. So anything can be made.
And so I think that's just kind of when we're getting over into the homemade paraphernalia, that's the next category.
Yeah.
Anything that's cut apart, took apart, put back together, and you're like, what in the world are they making? And what is this? That's a legitimate in your mind. We need to have a conversation, or I need to go Google, or I need to figure out what's going on with this to become more educated. Oh yeah, that's one more hide there. So we have 2 soup cans of Campbell's soup. One's real. And when we hold them up without feeling the weight and ask people which one do you think is real, most people actually pick the hide one because the label is a little brighter. So things like that. The hairbrush here, the end opens up. And we have a mixture of items that aren't hides, but could be things you should try and look at. Because anything like this is real dust off, but they make a hide version of this. But then we have the car thing.
By the way, these are all legal to buy because they're money safes. So you can buy wrong side. Sorry.
Yeah. So that one's a hide. This one's not, but it's like if you looked at them, you wouldn't know. And if there was a hide version of this, it looked just like this. We also have a paint can in there. I think Bexley Police Department gave us that. It's a small paint can that was in a car. And the paint can had been turned into a hide for marijuana. The officer said, my dog's alerting. I know there's marijuana in here. Do you want me to tear your whole truck apart and I'm going to find it? Or can you just tell me where it is? And it was in that paint can. So again, not to freak out if you find it, just to know what you're looking for. And we got to start opening things and looking at things. And the more combination of things that we talk about that you see, the more important that is that you start looking deeper, because the more of these things together, you know, even if there's one, you want to have a conversation, but there may be a simple answer. But then if you're finding multiple excuses, you need to start putting some pieces together.
I'm sure another one, just a regular flashlight, all kinds of things you have at home. The kids would never you would never question your kid having a flashlight, but they could have, even with batteries in there, they could have things stuffed in there.
And I think somebody had mentioned their son had said, oh yeah, they can hollow out a deodorant. And that is, we have one of those where they can just melt all the deodorant out of it and slide the thing way down. Plenty of room in there to hide things. We also talk to people in recovery of things that they say, hey, what's a sign your teacher could have noticed back in high school when you started bringing pills to school? One was he put it in Tootsie Rolls. I think schools have cracked down on candy and things because of the possibilities of that. But his highlighter was his biggest thing that he used to bring his pills into school. He just hollowed the inside of his highlighter out, took the back off of it, left the tip on so it looked like a highlighter. And his pills that he would take throughout the day were all down in that highlighter. So we try to bring you information that's come from people, from police officers in this area. We all hear rumors or stories of what's going on, but we really try to say these are the things we're seeing here. Doesn't mean don't be aware. Kids are smart. They might come up with something new tomorrow.
One kiddo we know, he put his ecstasy pills in a mechanical pencil. So that was in high school.
So it's just the kind of thing. So, and when we do these presentations for teachers, we're saying, you know, you can't find everything, you can't catch everything. But if a kid that has never used a highlighter ever, all of a sudden is really attached to using his highlighter, that's a big change. You know, maybe keep an eye out what's going on, and you notice him dozing off in class and those kind of things. So it's again just being observant of those things. That retainer case that was seized by Hilliard Police Department, there was heroin in that. They were using the retainer case to store their little bags of heroin. We don't talk a lot about heroin because we're talking about younger kids. These are the types of things that we also don't want to freak people out. Like, just because your kid experiments with this stuff doesn't mean they're going to become a heroin addict. But if you talk to anybody who did end up there, they all started here. So it's if we can do something more to make sure that more kids don't continue on that path, that's our goal. So we don't talk a lot about that. We're talking kind of more middle school to high school type ages. Usually it's once they experiment with this stuff and they get older. Some younger kids do it, but it's usually as they get older that they get into the other stuff. When that stuff's not getting them high anymore, that stuff's not getting them what they want anymore, then they move on to other stuff if they haven't grown out of it. That's the best way I can describe it. Cover-ups, we just say, our joke is if they come home smelling better than when they left the house, what are they trying to cover up from you? What are they trying to cover up that they did before they came home? And then just, again, your kid may have always loved mints. Your kid may have always had dry eyes and always used eye drops. But if there's something new that's changed, something new they're using, eye drops that they've never used before, they've never had them in their room before. And then Visine is very common, but when you're seeing the high strength Visine or the Rotos, right here, Roto is like the go-to brand if you've been smoking weed to hide your bloodshot eyes, or you've been vaping marijuana. That's the go-to brand to get the red out of your eyes, is Roto. So I'd never heard of Roto. It's ROHTO. Had never heard of it till in this context, because most people are going to use the more common Visines and things like that. So if you're seeing a Roto, somebody said, oh, use this stuff, it'll hide your eyes from your parents, unless you bought it for them. But that's the other thing. If you didn't buy the stuff for them at the pharmacy, how did it turn up in your house, or how did it turn up with them? And those are the kind of questions, not accusatorily, just say, hey, I found this. I've never seen this before. What'd you get this for? Why'd you use this? Those kind of things. So we have a lot of purchase paraphernalia in here. Again, we're not going to get too much into detail, but there are grinders here and more elaborate things. If you wanted to stay after, we're happy to show you more of this stuff in detail. Anything could be a pipe. They can sell these cute little pipes. But this is a pipe to smoke out of, because as long it can be used as decorative. So as long as it doesn't have the substance in it, it's legal to sell in Ohio. So we have all kinds of cute little pipes in here. This little chili pepper here. This is a pipe. Somewhere we have, it's actually over there, the car charger. Yeah, car charger with the cord, that's actually a pipe that somebody we know confiscated from their son.
This is a grinder.
I mean, not that it's funny, but I say that too. We're all in this together. Kids are kids. These things are in our community. And the second part of this is when you start that conversation, it helps erase the stigma. If you find these things or your kids are experimenting with these things, don't feel guilty. Don't feel that you did anything wrong. It's not a reflection on you as a parent. It's just a reality of the world we're in. And then we just have the knowledge and education to know, hey, this isn't good for our kids. We should probably help prevent them from experimenting with this stuff. So we, early other members of our groups were very, did these things that we talked about. And she found that and said, I'm taking. He's like, I spent like $50 on that. She's like, I don't care. It's a pipe. And then they had to, deal with it from there and talk and get him into counseling. But it's the, you'd rather find that and start the conversation there than have an officer finding them in an overdose situation or a distress situation. And what else? So other concerns, look at what they're reading. If they're reading something, you've never seen it before. Some things can be very obvious, like if your child has How to Grow Marijuana for Beginners, that might be something to have a conversation about. But other things that are very common books we have in the room, like 13 Reasons Why is actually, it's tabbed up because that's high-level English reading in the Hilliard School District. But there is another following online of a suicide culture, that if you are in depression and you read this book under a certain depressed mindset, you can find messages in there. So if you're seeing signs of depression and this is not required reading for the school, that's something to have a conversation about. And schools are aware this is a higher level. So if they have kids, they now know, they didn't know back then, and there's a movie out about it now. If you have kids who are already suffering from depression, this is not a good book to put in their curriculum. But we didn't know that. I mean, it's great literature, but kids and online cultures will piece things together. And notebooks, if they've got notebooks that you've never seen and they've got weird numbers and trackings and things in them, look for that. So I think we're getting, how much time did you say? 10 minutes. Okay.
Real quick on the clothing.
Yeah, so look at their clothing. Number one, if they've got clothing you didn't buy and you didn't see come in the house, you want to look at it. But there's all these companies that sell hides. That's one of the biggest reasons schools stopped letting baseball caps. I don't know, some have started to let them back in. I don't know if you guys allow baseball caps.
I see kids wear them.
Okay, ours lets them back in again now too. So
This is Healthy brand. This is No Bro brand. There's all kinds of brands.
yeah.
And
So in the tags here for hempies, they make their stuff out of hemp in addition to making it hides to make it attractive. And then No Bad Ideas is the one too. It's called No Bad Ideas Clothing Company. These are the tags we took off this clothing that we bought. That's a stocking cap that has a hide inside of it. And we'd be happy if you want to come up after, look at the clothes. We can kind of show you some of the other things here.
real quick history on dab. Do you know kids that do the dab? They don't know, but it is from a hip hop history, and they would do the slurps. Is that what they were doing? They were doing drugs, and then no, it couldn't have been the slurp.
They were inhaling.
They were doing that.
And they would
Inhale
cough,
the marijuana dabs. Yeah.
and they were holding. Yeah, it was the slurps, or maybe it was the smoking. They hold the smoke out, and then they're coughing, and that's how that started. So there is a yes.
Oh, we didn't talk about, but this is called a sploof, and this what they'll do is if they're using something and they're exhaling it, they put the dryer sheet in the cotton to absorb the smell. so that you don't smell what they're exhaling. And she said she just found out that they actually sell
They're
those.
selling this now. This came in a 25 pack we got them for a Girl Scout event, and it came in a 25 pack of thingies.
What's called Nature Pack.
The Nature Pack.
So they donated to us and said, yeah, our Girl Scouts don't need this. And that's an example too. We say it's just worth asking the question, because we've heard stories that people have bought clothing or their kids have clothing. The kid didn't even know what it was because they're like Diamond, because that's a skater brand, but Diamond can also mean drugs. And so
Crystal Ice
can mean, yeah. So it can mean meth, and that could be a symbol that you use meth, or that you want to buy meth, or that you sell meth. So, and one of our other members of our organization is a guidance counselor in one of the Hilliard schools. She saw a little kid, and she does elementary school, wearing, I don't know if it was Diamond. It was Diamond. And so she kind of had a conversation, where did you get that? He's like, oh, we got this at the thrift store, you know. So I think he was 5th grade, so he's older, and just kind of said, I just want you to be aware that this has multiple meanings. So if somebody approaches you and says something that's, you know, I'm not saying you can't wear it, but be aware, this could be a sign to somebody out there that you are looking to buy meth. So, and she had enough of a relationship with that child that she could have that conversation with him.
community code words.
That's in the later part. Okay. Yep. So we've kind of covered this pretty well. Just look for things in their room. If they've got money and they don't have a job and you didn't give it to them, where'd the money come from? Phones, technology, money monitoring, just, I mean, any device. They should not have a device that you don't have the passcode to. That, you know, kids, you own everything that they own. And the most common question, and we could talk, I guess we can talk about that. We'll talk about that later in the.
I'm going to throw this in real quick. Prescription pill bottles that don't belong to you or your family, or even if they do, they're in their room, or even cough syrup. Yeah. So Street Smart, I went to one last week, and he said they have not confiscated one pill in the last 3 years that was what it had in it, what it was supposed to be, like a Xanax, an Adderall. They all had other content, including combos of cocaine, fentanyl, and all those other things. So even if a kid thinks they're having a pill party and they're dumping in all their pills, they think that's an Adderall. It likely isn't, if it didn't come from an actual doctor.
They can get pill presses online.
Yep.
They're making their own mixtures and making it look like something it's not. So.
Yep.
So I think, and a lot of these tips we'll talk about in the panel discussion. So I'm not going to cover everything because I'm sure it's going to come up when we talk. The bottom part here, this is an important thing to realize that I didn't realize till we started talking and doing these research, that any device, no matter how old it is, if you connect it to Wi-Fi, can become a texting device, including those old iPod shuffles. So as a parent, you want to get downloaded some kind of network scanner app at your house, so that you can, and there's all kinds of them, Apple, iTunes has one, every device has it. See what devices are connecting to your Wi-Fi. Number one, my IT department would say, make sure it's password protected. You don't want people outside your house connecting. But see what's connecting, because if there's devices connecting that you don't recognize what they are and don't know what they are, it could be a sign that your kid has another device they're using on the side to communicate with friends, communicate with people. And it could be something as simple as an old iPod shuffle that you didn't even remember was in your house because it's about 20 years old. So again, just an early way to catch that. If there's something connecting to your network you don't know about, start asking questions. What is this? And go from there. A lot of parents have started to switch to this, where they give their kids a debit card instead of giving them cash, especially in today's society. It's also a way to check where they're spending their money. If they're spending a lot of money at Speedway, you might want to look. Are you buying a lot of pods and things? And usually kids in school aren't going to take debit card to let you buy something in the bathroom from them. So it's a newer tip we've talked about, and parents have seemed to like considering that. This is the newer part that we just, in general, hopefully your schools have been educating you a lot. If you're seeing any major changes in your children or your loved ones, especially coming out of COVID, really notice these behavior changes and just be aware of them, and whether they need to talk to somebody, Nationwide Children's Hospital is the go-to place. If you talk to most pediatricians, they're going to say, go talk to them. Their new behavioral center is beautiful. You can walk in, get help, get resources. They'll talk to your kid, they'll talk to you, and help you get a plan together. If it is at the point that they need to be kept for 5 to 10 days to stabilize, they will. And it's a beautiful facility. It's not like, people have the stigma, oh, I don't want my kid locked up in the hospital. But no, it's a beautiful facility that is intended to be a supportive environment to get them stabilization they need to keep them safe. But that's like, if that's the only way to keep them safe, because they're cutting or they're thinking about suicide. Other than that, they can link you with all resources. And we just really encourage you to do that. I want to get to this, what to do about prevention. Continually educate yourself, maintain that open dialogue, know that their peers are using, and know that kids are using. And I think Debbie can talk to that, to say sometimes ask the open-ended questions.
Oh, yes, like car rides are great times to just ask your kid, hey, I went to this thing today and they were talking about this. Have you ever heard of that weird word? Or just to keep it really casual and non-accusatory. And then maybe schedule a lunch with them and go make the conversation fun. It doesn't have to be a hard thing. And you can remove it to, do you know any friends who use this? And they may be, but they're going to share maybe more of a friend than themselves. If they say they're going somewhere, check them. Just check that they're there, because kids lie. Sorry, I have 3. They lie, and then you check them, and then you talk through that, and you figure out why they're lying. And oftentimes it's not because they have malintent. They just want to be accepted, or they won't tell on somebody else because they don't want to be that snitch. So it's a culture that our kids have of keeping each other, their devices hidden, because they think that's the cool thing, or some of them are using legitimately because they don't know how else to cope. So they're self-medicating, and that only escalates.
Another thing that we say to talk about, again, and these are just tips. You know what works best for you and your child. But some kids, what really works is to talk about the consequences. And that's what I know the approach that the SROs take too. Like, did you realize not only can you get suspended from school, but you can have this consequence? I like to remind people that, especially if you're turning 18 and you're in high school, that marijuana, even though it's a minor misdemeanor fine only, it disqualifies you from student financial aid if you get a conviction. So there's things about their future to educate them on that, you may just think it's a little weed on the weekend, I'm having fun in high school, but that could disqualify you from federal financial aid. So these are decisions. If the whole we want your brain to grow thing doesn't work, there's other strategies. There's also, if your kid's an athlete, help them talk through it and say, you realize how important this is to you. You could get kicked off the football team. Is it really worth it to you? Those kind of things. Do you want to talk about safe word?
Oh, sure. So in those situations when you're at a party where your wrestling team is all together and somebody pops out an Adderall pill and says, hey, everybody take one, and you realize in that situation that that's not something you want to do, or your child wants to do, and they understand the consequences. If you have a code word with your parents that they can just text, you guys have talked about this, like what happens if you're in a situation where you feel unsafe, what do you do? And so they can text that to mom or dad, a sibling, and immediately somebody will come and get you. And discussions can happen later, but the thing is you're going to get them home safe, and that they know that they can just, they can only do them. They can't change what Johnny's going to do or Bobby's going to do, but that's not my thing. So I'm going to have a code word with my parents to get someplace safe.
Yeah. And the other thing a lot of kids say is, oh, I thought only these 5 people were going to be there.
Right.
And then this whole different group or these other people show up. And when they get there, it's not what they thought it was. If you have that either text or over the phone, like generic, a lot of people use like weird food words or different things, whatever it is that only you and your child know. And that can even be a text. And my son, before, he's a freshman, so we've had these conversations for years, but really this year getting back out and going to football games if you find yourself somewhere or you're going down the street to play with friends at the park and it's different people that you thought and you can't get out, text me if you don't feel you can call, and then I'll call you and use that code word. So just talk about those strategies and get them. These are things kids don't think about. That's why we have the fully formed brains. We think about these things so we can have these play it out ahead of time for them.
That also lets them know that it's okay, that you're safe with your parents, and that if you've made a mistake or you're in a spot where you didn't plan to be, that it's okay. They're gonna take care of you and bring you back home.
All right, I think that we covered a lot, and we'll cover more even in the panel.
Yes, wow, that was a lot of wonderful information. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you guys want to grab your seats, we'll get the officers a microphone as well. Thank you for your information. If we could first start with either Officer Renner, or Officer Kelly, could you summarize your roles and responsibilities in the community and on the New Albany campus?
So this is my 8th school year on the New Albany Plain Local Schools campus. Previous 7 years, I was a DARE officer. I taught drug use prevention to 5th grade and 7th grade. This year, well, in January, I took over as the school resource officer. So now my office is at the high school. I basically deal with high school, middle school issues, and then the new DARE officer will handle all the primary and intermediate issues that we have on campus. And I'm just there as a resource. That's why it's a school resource officer. You know, anything they need. I've mentored kids. I've tried to, I've hooked them up with counseling services. I've investigated, any criminal, anything criminal that goes on campus that's brought to my attention. The school administrators do a search on a student and they find any contraband that's usually brought, to me, and then I determine if it's criminal or not. And then in the summertime, I do safety town and bike patrol. So other than that, I don't really work patrol anymore like I used to.
You're kind of a local celebrity on campus. There were my kids and every kid I know is like, oh, he's so cool.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, after 7 years, that means that 7 years I did something right.
Yes, for sure.
I've been assigned to patrol my entire career with New Albany. In 2019, I was able to become the canine handler. My partner, Amigo, is trained in the detection of narcotics, as well as tracking a missing person or an endangered person that is unaccounted for. So my role now as the canine handler, I still do normal patrol and take calls for service and traffic enforcement and things like that. But I also help supplement any kind of request from another patrol officer or another agency in the detection of narcotics that would be unseen or unable to be detected by a human. Canine Amigo's ability to smell, or a dog's ability to smell, is is much greater than a person. Just the way their noses are designed compared to ours is they bring air in through the front and then out through the sides, and a dog can tell you which side of his nose the scent came in and from what direction it came from. So it's kind of neat to watch him work, but the dog's ability is supplementing what we can't see or smell on a traffic stop or in a home or anywhere else.
And are you doing any of that work with Amigo on school campus, or do you routinely?
Yes, so we partner with the school, and at their request, we will come to the school at any time and perform a randomized sniff of an area as requested. And we try to do that, obviously to keep contraband off the school campus, but also as a deterrent. So a lot of times to do a full sweep of our school as large as it is, it takes a lot. It's pretty intense. So we have to have other dogs that Joe brings from other agencies that help us with that. So we don't do those quite as often, but he's around. He'll stop in, on campus, maybe just, run through the parking lot, maybe hit some lockers, just randomly. So the kids never know, when he's coming.
We talked quite a bit just about kind of what's happening here locally in the community with the officers. And There's a lot to share. I thought one thing was really honestly the biggest concern, and you mentioned is the biggest concern is kind of the new hot thing, is an increase in edible THC. Can you talk a little bit about that in marijuana?
Yeah, so the big thing we're seeing now with the teenagers are edibles. So whether it's a candy with THC in it, or brownies or cookies, I guess Girl Scout cookies are a big thing now. They can order most of the stuff online. Some of your local drug dealers will extract the THC themselves and like melt down Jolly Ranchers, put the THC in it, reform them back up, and then distribute them out that way too. But that's the biggest thing that I'm hearing about, getting information from the kids with now currently.
And Officer Renner, you have mentioned that some of the parents honestly are overlook and dismiss kind of the use of marijuana and this THC problem. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's one of the concerning things I'll hear sometimes on a traffic stop involving a kid is, well, it's just using marijuana. I know he uses marijuana sometimes, but I think a lot of it being dismissed like that is due to not being educated on what the marijuana is now. In the 1960s, marijuana had about a 2% THC in it. In 95, the THC level was about 4%. That jumped up to 12% in 2010. And now the average leafy marijuana that is confiscated and tested is at 17 to 20%. The stuff that's coming out of dispensaries is, what we're seeing is between 25 to 50% THC. And the marijuana dab wax that's being used, and we're seeing a lot of this recently, and it's usually late teenagers that I'm seeing it out of cars. The vaping, they make pens, and you can order a THC cartridge, and a lot of those are in the 90% THC, which the effects of that on a growing brain, I don't think there's even any studies that know what that's going to do to the kids.
Well, and that's something I started digging after we had that conversation, because it just didn't even occur to me, and it was shocking. So just to briefly describe some of those statistics, in a journal article written by the National Institutes of Health called Effects of Cannabis on the Adolescent Brain, marijuana, second to alcohol, is the most widely used intoxicant among teens. Approximately 25% of adolescents report being drunk in the past month, and 23% report using marijuana in the past month. Annual prevalence rates of high school seniors have increased over the last decade from 22 to 36%. And alarmingly, the perceived risk of use has decreased from 80% of seniors reporting marijuana use as a great risk in 1992 to only 40% reporting marijuana use as risky in 2012. So just their understanding of the risk is certainly a concern. In another study by American Psychological Association, the team found that persistent marijuana use was linked to a decline in IQ, even after the researchers controlled for educational differences. The most persistent users experienced a drop in neuropsychological functioning equivalent to 6 IQ points. That's in the same realm as what you'd see with lead exposure. So it's a huge risk for our kids, and they're not aware of it. And that's something I'll call attention to. John Hood is here. Thank you for being here. In your packets, you have the key findings from our last substance use survey conducted here at New Albany Plain Local Schools by the Hanover Research Firm. This was done in the spring of 2021. So it's interesting, and I think John here is our, let me get his title correct. It's a long one. Director of Student Services, Safety and Security, which means he's super important. So as John said, the statistics here locally are not as bad, surely, as they are in some other school districts, but the concern for them locally right now is vaping and making sure we're addressing students' misconceptions that it's a safe alternative to smoking. So I think another thing to point out in the findings is also where students are using drinking, smoking, or vaping, or using drugs. It's at home and it's at a friend's home. So that just alerted me as we begin to think about this and to follow the recommendation from Hart that we're not impeding the relationship by looking and checking. We have to be doing that, because if they're going to do it, it's going to happen in our home or at a friend's home. So I thought that was really important information. And then also in here, 29% believe that vaping is not addictive, another misconception. So really some great information. Thank you, John, for providing that to us. Any other additional comments there that you just wanted to make about the marijuana use, or before we move on to some of the other problems? Okay, or questions? Prescription medication use. Can we talk a little from the officer's perspective about the prevalence here in New Albany, the misuse of prescription medication?
I've been here at this agency for 14 years, and that prescription drug abuse has been one of the biggest things I've heard amongst our teens from the first day I started here in New Albany. It seems, from what I'm seeing, at least within our students at the schools right now, it's not as prevalent. I think the vaping and the THC edibles are kind of taking its place right now. But I don't know what they're seeing on patrol as far as prescription drug abuse. I'm sure it's still happening. We're just not catching the kids with it. They're not coming to school high on the pills like they had in the past.
From a patrol standpoint, a lot of the times when I'm seeing the prescription abuse has been post-graduation. It's typically college kids or college-age kids that have made that jump. So I get to network with a lot of other canines in the area, and some of the things like they had said earlier, there was a huge seizure just outside of OSU's campus earlier this year of Xanax pills that were not Xanax pills. They were methamphetamine pressed into Xanax. And there were also Vicodin pills that were not Vicodin, they were fentanyl pressed into Vicodin pills. So the kids are thinking they're going out to a party and they're going to crush up a Vicodin and they're going to snort it because they've done that before, and now they just snorted fentanyl, or in some cases carfentanil, which is worse than fentanyl. Or they think they're going to snort up a Xanax, but now they just snorted methamphetamine, and now they've got a whole new addiction that they never thought they were going to go down that road, but they inadvertently went there because they had no idea what it was when they got it. So that seems to be a new trend for college-age kids to be aware of, is these fake pills are coming into the country by large packages. It's by thousands.
And just to reinforce what Hart had said earlier, when I have my drug use prevention talks with kids at school, even at the 5th grade level, I would always tell the kids, you're trusting a drug dealer that's looking to make money. They don't care about your health, So they may tell you something, this is just marijuana. Well, it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago now, down in the Grove City area, we had a large distribution of what was being sold as THC oils, and it was really heroin, just to get the kids hooked on the heroin. So, you can't trust these people selling you these pills, or, selling you the marijuana, the THC, the dabs, whatever, because you don't know what's in it. And the kids don't understand that. So that's why, having conversations with your kids, and research shows, just like they said, the earlier you start talking, the less likely they are to start using. It's mandated now as far as prescription drug abuse, kindergarten through 12th grade. There's some type of lessons being taught in wellness at the schools now.
That's wonderful. Yeah, go ahead.
The majority of overdoses in our area have been like the 25s through 30s, and there was a large number of those from my children's high school years back. And one of the recovering heroin addicts from there, who's the one who had ecstasy, he had a friend and they both shot up the same heroin. They ended up on heroin, but they started, he will tell you, with alcohol, marijuana, and then it escalates to the ecstasy pills. They keep seeking a larger high, a bigger high, and oftentimes they don't know what they're getting. And so they ended up down in the hilltop getting their heroin. And so he and his friend both used the same amount, shot each other up, one died. So it is just that, it is an escalation. And if we can catch it back here or even stop them from doing any of it, that's what our goal is.
So, and that's something else, back to the gateway drug thing, some people argue that marijuana is not a gateway drug. You guys made the comment that, not just because you use marijuana doesn't mean you're going to escalate to heroin or opiates or, you know, something harder. But everybody who is using those harder things started there. Everyone I've talked to. I had a case here locally, it's probably been 10 years ago now, where we caught some burglary suspects. And anytime I would make those types of arrests, I'd just try to ask them, not for evidence, just for my own curiosity to see how they ended up in that position. Because one of the main reasons I got into law enforcement is I have an older brother who's a drug addict. So it's always kind of intrigued me. And this kid, one of the suspects, is the son of a preacher, was homeschooled all through school, said he spent his freshman year of college drunk, sophomore year getting high with marijuana, and then he ended up with a $1,500 a week heroin habit. So it can escalate, and they start with the alcohol and the marijuana and then move up.
And this is maybe a dumb question. Where do they get the pills? How do you get them? Where do you get them? What's the process if you're a random kid here in New Albany?
Neighborhood, every neighborhood.
Social media makes it easy for them to get whatever they want now. And you got to listen. I tell parents too, you got to listen to the lingo, the things kids are saying. Use Urban Dictionary. I have 3 boys. You know, I relied on Urban Dictionary to figure out what they're talking about a lot. Listen to their music as much as I dislike some of their music. The dab story, you know, these kids, I had 5th graders coming across the stage at DARE graduation, and they'd get their DARE diploma and they'd do the dab. So then I had to educate the parents there at that DARE graduation. Okay, we need to pay attention to what our kids are listening to. These kids don't know what it is, right? But if you listen to the song that dance came from or that move came from, they talk about getting high the whole time. And it's from using the dab waxes of THC. They just get the pipe extremely hot. They touch the dab to it. It vaporizes. It causes them to cough. So they cough. And then they start throwing their arm in it to make it a cool little dance. And that's how that all started. And people don't realize that.
The Street Smart, they do help with a lot of those terms too, the gasoline, and they talk about gasoline, and that is, isn't that the vape, the dabs? I think that's the dabs, but there's all kinds of terminology that these kids know. And the Street Smart offers those lists of all those different drugs, what they mean and their names. And I learned also that there are emojis attached to every drug. And so I still have that to research. But if you see your kids have, you know, all these different emojis, I can't tell you what they are because I haven't looked them up yet, but they mean something.
And going back to where you said, where do they get the pills? Another part of the presentation that we sometimes do is that we talk about, they will get them from your house, they'll get them from relatives' houses, they will get them from prescription medications initially that are safer. If they can get them from safer sources, they're going to get them from safer sources. It's when they can't, if they become addicted, that they will do that. So we say not only should you consider, if you've got kids of any age, getting, like in my house, I have 2 lock boxes. I have one that my husband and I can both get in, and then I also, my husband has born with a birth defect in his leg, has struggled with chronic pain. He talks about, he's like, I am so fortunate that I hated pain pills, and pain pills made me sick. Otherwise, I would have been the prime candidate that would have gone down that path, and when I couldn't get pills anymore, but was still in pain. So, you know, he talks about, he's like, I sympathize and empathize because that could have been me, but I was tough guy and said, I'm gonna handle the pain, and I hate those pain pills. But understanding when you're in that kind of pain post-surgery, that somebody regulates those pills, and then if you don't use them, you get rid of them. And I know I'm sure you guys do drug take backs.
Yeah,
as well.
we do the drug take backs, and we're fortunate here in New Albany. We have a 24-hour, 7 days a week, 365-day a year drug drop box in the lobby of the police department. So you can come in and just dump your unused medications in there to get rid of them, because that is how most people start abusing prescription drugs. And just like you were saying, I had back surgery in 2012. I have 3 boys, all 3 were honor students. And I didn't trust having Percocets in my house, just because, not that they would take them necessarily, but you never know, the curiosity's there. They have friends over, things like that. So I kept them locked up in my gun safe, where I'm the only one that has access to them.
Yeah, and I did a secondary safe. So there's one that's my stuff we don't want my son to get at, that my husband and I both have access, and I have one because they give my husband pain pills to take if he's having an episode, and is this working better? And he's like, I don't want that temptation. I don't want that, so I'm the only one that can access that, and I only give him half at a time now. Good news, not that you guys care, but he had a spine stimulator pain relief device installed last week that is working wonderfully, and he's doing great. But so we like to share our stories because this happens to good people. It happens to everyone, and that's the secondary part is like, don't feel like you have to hide that something's going on. Everybody is here in this together. Everybody's here to help. You know, he shares the story of his brother. Everybody is touched by it. So that helps erase the stigma, and let's talk about it, and let's get help. Let's get resources. Let's put safety measures and safety plans in place to help kids and help adults and help everybody.
We do have drug disposal kits available back there. You just just open it up, put your drugs in it, put some water in, shake it up. It's just like cat litter. And then you can seal it back up and put it in your trash can. So we do have some of those are sponsored by Adam H.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Thank you. There's great information there from Adam H as well, booklet and then the disposal. So please take those with you, and I'm sure we could access more at some point if we need to provide those as additional resources. So vaping, we talked a little, did you have something else to say? No, okay. We talked a little bit about vaping. It sounds like you all, the officer said you kind of felt like you had a good grip on it, but it's creeping back in again. Kind of where are we with that?
So we're starting to see, we went to a zero tolerance policy as a school resource officer. My Detective Southers now, when he was school resource officer, it got to be to where it was happening so frequently and there was so much on campus that he went to zero tolerance, started charging every single person. Typically with juveniles, we try to take the least coercive action when it comes to law enforcement, and we try to, you know, help them instead of just punish them for everything. But with the vaping getting as bad as it was, he went zero tolerance, and it really, we saw a huge decline. Not that they weren't doing it, they just weren't bringing it to school. Starting to see a little uptick now where I'm getting more and more where school administrators are confiscating it when they search, you know, a kid's bag or something, they'll find something. But our school does a really good job. They have administrators at the high school assigned to each restroom. They do checks. I'm not sure how often, but every half hour or so, an administrator has to check the restrooms that are assigned to them. So that also really helped us last year when we had our graffiti investigation on, you know, nailing down what time people were in certain restrooms or what time the graffiti appeared and things like that. Just last week, you know, I had a staff member come to my SRO office and say, hey, can you go check the restroom in E building because I smell a fruity smell outside the bathroom. Well, by the time I got there, no one was in there and I couldn't smell it. But, you know, so just they're very vigilant when it comes to that stuff, our staff, all staff. And then, like I said, the administrators check the restrooms every so many minutes.
And that's something too, just to mention, we do have a partnership with Ohio chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. We did it was earlier this year, I think, on the Store It Safe campaign. So we do have access to some of those lock boxes. I know we've provided at least 30 to the New Albany Food Pantry, and families came and picked them up to store their weapons, their guns, their prescription drugs and different things like that. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know. We can certainly do another outreach to Ohio AAP and bringing their Store It Safe program, because it's an excellent program for exactly what you said, locking things up, not because we have bad kids, just because kids are kids and they're curious. So that's a great note. Just wanted to mention that. One thing to just, let's, you know, break the misconceptions, because I didn't, to be honest, know a lot about vaping and what is in that aerosol. So let's be really clear. E-cigarette aerosol is not harmless water vapor. The e-cigarette aerosol that users breathe from the device and exhale, in these cases kids, can contain harmful and potentially harmful substances, including nicotine, which 99% of them do according to the CDC, ultrafine particles that can be inhaled deep into the lungs, which causes cancer, flavorings such as diacetyl, a chemical linked to a serious lung disease, volatile organic compounds, additional chemical causing agents, and heavy metals such as nickel, tin, and lead. The aerosols that users inhale and exhale can expose both the user and bystanders to harmful substances. So if your kid tries to tell you that vaping is not really that bad, it is. So I just want to break that stigma there. Can we turn over then to alcohol? And I know Officer Renner, you said you're not seeing as much on campus this year, but you're seeing an increased level at the patrol level, underage parties and in the home and so forth.
I think in the my entire career here, it's always there's always been alcohol, and we know the kids. I can speak to, I think it was over 10 years ago now. It was like 24 kids preparing to go to the Westerville football game at Swickard Woods, and they were all drinking, getting ready to jump in cars and then drive to Westerville. A bike patrol officer happened to ride up, and they didn't recognize a police officer on a bicycle, and we were able to catch everybody there and prevent all of them from driving. And there was quite a few kids there. So it's been my entire career that happens, and I think we can all think back to when we were in high school and going through school. It's something that's always been around. A couple of instances I can think of, we have had some parents that are hosting parties. I can think of a very large one a few years back where there had been 200 kids. When we knocked on the door, they ran everywhere, and on our cruiser video camera, there was just kids running everywhere, and we're not going to catch all of those kids. We did charge the parents, and they were found guilty in court for it. But just keep in mind that not every parent is on the same page as you. So even when your kids tell you that there's going to be a parent home, that parent might not look at things the same way you do. So just to keep that in mind.
And a lot of these parents that will host these parties, they're like, well, if I take the keys and I don't let them drive, well, then it's safe. But on the big one that he was talking about from a long time ago, I remember we went back and we were watching the cruiser video of everybody scattering. And there was a girl just in her bra and panties that went running in front of the cruiser. So there's that many kids there. The parents can't keep tabs on everybody. So yeah, we're keeping it safe because we're not letting anybody leave. But there's other things that go on when kids are doing that stuff too. So yeah, that's just a little extra there.
Great point. And something we talked about when I was talking with Dawn and Debbie is that really the kids, and something to be aware of, they're doing this because they're self-medicating. So in many cases, there's other issues at hand. Vaping, marijuana, alcohol, and pills, it's potentially mental health struggles. And so it's something to just keep in mind that maybe addressing those mental health struggles earlier with prevention and keeping those lines of communication open can really prevent tragedies later, because although some of those things may not kill them now, it may escalate into something cheaper and more dangerous later in life. So just understanding that it comes in many cases from a place of self-medicating. I don't know if there's anything you would add to that.
And I think the one thing we were talking about is when people, again, to erase the stigma, when you think of mental health, people want to go to like schizophrenia and things like that they think are really severe. But another thing to realize, and I think, again, COVID has taught us that anxiety and depression are so prevalent and that people just cope with it. And some people have good coping mechanisms and some people don't. But when you look at high school now versus what it was before, and it's do more, get there faster. So now, I mean, how many of our kids are getting their high school classes done in middle school? And then by the time they're junior and senior, they're taking college classes. And there's this pressure, have this great resume, do so well on this AP test, do all of this. That is a lot of pressure. And these really good kids, I suffer from anxiety. And if I had known now what I knew back then, I absolutely had those symptoms where I would try to go to sleep at night and my heart was racing. And my doctor said, oh, I think maybe you have asthma, because that's what they thought it was. But looking back now, no, that was anxiety of just all day long, like studying and, being in activities. And I was a dancer and a cheerleader and like going from, and then I need to get the best grades because I know I want to go to law school and I know I want to do all this stuff. That I'm fortunate that I'm stubborn and I didn't like, I was the goody two shoes that was like, why are you people doing all this stupid stuff? I have places to go and things to do. But I lived in a small town where all they did is drink all the time because there was nothing else to do. There were movie theaters, you'd go in the cornfield and drink. I saw something different for myself, but all of my family and my brother and everybody, and they're very successful people, but that's how they grew up. And to understand that that's probably a release for them too, because their pressures of their life, that there was nothing else to do. There weren't gyms to go work out. There weren't fun activities. There weren't movie theaters. Let's go in the cornfield and have a bonfire and drink. That was their release. So it's about finding those healthy things and then recognizing if it's getting to that point that they need to maybe talk with a counselor or they need to talk with their family doctor, that this pressure is too much and it's becoming too overwhelming. And in our school district especially, we're really seeing that because COVID allowed everybody to kind of take a step back. And now that we're coming back out of it and they're like, oh no, I have to go do all this stuff again and all the pressure's back on. It's really a lot for people right now.
I can second that too. We've seen, we've definitely seen an increase in mental health type calls too, at the high school on our campus as well.
I'm just wondering, as we kind of summarize and wrap up, if you think of maybe the most important message that you would share to parents, families, and the community, if you could think about what that is and share that with us.
If I could add one more thing for the mental health, I wasn't even aware that the DSM-5 is what psychologists and psychiatrists use to help with the classification of mental disorders. They've added cannabis-induced psychotic disorder, cannabis-induced anxiety disorder, and cannabis-induced sleep disorders. So the marijuana is now causing mental illness. And I did recently deal with a young man and he's an adult, young teens. So he's been diagnosed with several mental health issues that he was trying to self-medicate with marijuana as opposed to the medicine that was prescribed by his doctor. And the high levels of marijuana that he was using actually were causing him to have anxiety and to have mental health breaks. And he was trying to he kept talking about how I read about it. Marijuana has been used and they've proven that it will help me relax. So I tried to look that up a little bit. There is a study back in the 70s and the 80s, and the marijuana percentage that they were talking about in that study was 3 and 4%. The marijuana that he was using in the vape cartridge that I found in his backpack was 94%. So the high THC levels are causing anxiety, especially in these young kids. But they found online that this is going to make me relax. Marijuana makes me chill out. And that's not the case anymore with the high THC levels. It's not causing the effects of the movies that back in the day, the Cheech and Chong. That's not what the marijuana is doing to these kids. It's causing them to have more anxiety. So they're taking marijuana to relax and help their anxiety, and it's exacerbating the problem.
It's no wonder at those levels, of course.
We have a young man we know that uses frequently, and he is a constant roller coaster. When he can afford to get whatever marijuana, he's just using the marijuana, that brings him down, and then as soon as he needs more, he is a mess, and he can't hold a job. He's impaired, and I'm convinced it's from the marijuana use.
Any other summarizing? What would you say? What's important to communicate to the community?
Thing that comes to mind is you are not alone. So this is a community effort. We need to look out for our kids, friends, and family members even, and just ask questions and be the one that opens that conversation and makes it okay.
I tell parents all the time, be nosy. The kids don't want you hovering over them. Be that helicopter parent, be in their business. You should have all their passwords to all their technology. Know who they're hanging out with, have, Life 360 or whatever app you want to use on their phone so you know where they're at, when they're at, and all that kind of stuff. My favorite thing when my kids were getting into their teens was the Ring doorbells and cameras. I got cameras all over my house. I could tell they couldn't lie to me about when they came home, when they left, anything like that. So, surveillance cameras, whether it's Ring or Nest or whatever, those things are great. And then the open lines of communication. Make sure you have a good enough relationship to where they feel comfortable to come and talk to you, because that's big. If they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to come talk to you.
Well, that was something that Debbie, you even shared with me. I'm thinking, gosh, I have a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and an 8-year-old, but it doesn't have to be those really difficult, heroin conversations. It could be, like you said, just to begin to have that dialogue, whether it's about Tylenol. No, I can't give you Tylenol every single night just because you want it. It's, understanding how it applies to the kids and then addressing them at that age.
And in addition to that, what else can we do instead? So instead of Tylenol, what can we do? Let's get some water, let's drink some water, make sure you're hydrated, and other ways to ease that headache versus just that medicine that's legal.
Just one thing for us, never hesitate to give us a call. We're here to help everybody that we can. Even if it's just you want to talk to an officer on the phone about some things, or if you want us to come and talk to you and your child, we can do that as well. Education is the best we can do to help the community, I think. And we have a lot of great resources within our agency. If you need some assistance, we can try and point you in the right direction. We have a juvenile probation officer. We're lucky she works right out of the police department.
You have these in your packets, and you could share a little bit about this program.
Yeah. So we, like you said earlier, we try and anytime we're dealing with a juvenile, kids are going to make bad choices. Punishment is not always the answer. So we are lucky enough to have the juvenile probation officer that can help with our diversion program. So a lot of times we catch a kid with a vape or marijuana or a traffic offense and things like that. We can push them into the diversion program through education, and she usually does a lot of community service-based things as well. And then the charges, they never go anywhere. They get sealed up at the police department, and they don't exist. They don't go on a record because, like they said, things like that can affect college education, scholarships, and things like that, financial aid, as well as I like to tell a lot of the kids sometimes, like, well, you want to go be a teacher. Well, when you fill out your application at that school, they're going to ask you, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? And to be a police officer, you don't even have to have been caught. It wants to know everything you have ever done in your past, whether you were caught, convicted, or charged. Have you ever done these kind of things? You have to answer yes or no and then take a polygraph test. So trying to teach the kids that what the decision to make now is going to come back 10 years from now, 5 years from now when they're applying for college and things like that. But our probation officer does an excellent job. There's also a pre-diversion program that is voluntary that parents can enroll their child in if they're just having some issues where a kid hasn't gotten in trouble for anything, but you see some bumps in the road that you want to get them on the right track and you think that we can help. She does an excellent job in that program as well. And she also has a lot of resources to help educate parents to help in that area.
Or if your child's just being unruly, you put them in the free diversion program, and then it's kind of like putting them on probation yourself. And then if they don't complete it, you can file unruly charges yourself with the juvenile prosecutor's office.
One real quick, I do know that the City of Columbus police hiring standards currently read that it's not just even conviction, it is use of marijuana in the last year for an application will prevent them from continuing on in that until like a year has passed for just admitted use, and that polygraph would show that.
And I think, my parting thing is, we said that this is about conversations, this is giving you tips, but I think it's also understanding we're all human. Our kids are human, we're human. Number one, if something does happen in your child's experiment, don't take it personally. Don't feel like you're a failure as a parent. To keep that outlook of this is part of the process, this is part of life, and reach out to the resources. And I think that understanding, I think those programs you have are great. And I'm going to take those brochures because we are always in this county looking for ways. Like I said, I'm very focused on restorative justice. And even when kids or people make mistakes, my message is always, we're not going to give up on you. Our justice system has really changed. That yes, there's consequences for behavior, but they're really, especially when you're talking misdemeanor levels, nonviolent things that are coming out of substance use disorder, of let's address that. Let's address what led to this. Let's address the mental health disorder. And there is understanding and compassion in the justice system from them. I'm the prosecutor in Hilliard. I work with their prosecutor and other prosecutors. We have compassion, and it really is a partnership, and we're not out to get your kids. We really are trying to educate and help and be part of the solution.
Well, I can't thank you enough. This has been such a really important conversation, and I think for sure we will have it again. So I appreciate so much your contributions. In your packets today, hard copies and then digitally, there's various information and resources provided. So please visit the websites listed there for additional information. Again, the medical disposal packets are here on the counter. Excuse me. The bedroom will be open after as well for any questions from the Heart ladies as well, and the officers can stay around for a couple minutes if you have questions. As far as sharing this, please feel free to take this recording once it's finished and summarized. We'll post it to YouTube and share it out just so that we can provide these resources to as many people in the community as possible. Another to mention that the Heart ladies showed me is Sun Behavioral Health. A lot of people in the community comment that there are very few resources for somebody that needs help. And sunbehavioralhealth.com is one right now that has immediate openings. So if somebody's looking for some assistance in that department, Sun Behavioral is somebody that you could call today and a child could be seen. Life Stance Health is another one. And then of course, Adam H. And then locally, we have a great group of ladies that run the Wellbeing Connection, wellbeingconnection.org, and they work a lot with mental health. So another local resource for us here. Again, thank you for your attendance today. We'll be back in November talking about coping and resilience through a pandemic. We will have Star here. If there are other topics you're interested in hearing more about, let us know. And then flip your folders over before you leave. And if you have a sticker on the back, you're a winner, and come see me for a door prize. So thank you all so much. Have a great weekend.